Immigration Nation? Wow, we've had a string of phenomenal guests joining us, and today is no different. I'm going to introduce her in just a minute. This one is all about express entry, and I've done a ton of work on express entry. I produced a ton of videos, but never have I dived. Well, let me just stop here. That's hilarious. It's live. I know it's live because it just went live on my camera, but this session today is all about express entry. And although I've done a ton of comments, I've done a ton of videos, I've talked about it almost in every live Q&A, never before have we dived in as deep as we're going to dive in today. All right. Today, 2021, the top tips on express entry. I've got some tips, but my guest today, Tamara Mosher-Kuczer, she has got the tips of all tips that she's bringing. And I can tell you something, you guys, and welcome, Tamara. I'll say hello to you first. How are you doing?
Good, Mark. Very excited to be here with you.
It's awesome to have you. So I'll let you guys, I'm going to pull back the curtains a little bit and I'm going to tell you guys something. When it comes to the latest information that comes out, that's released on the website, that the government releases, Tamara's the one who finds it. And guess what she does? And this is why I have her here. And this is why I have all of the previous guests. She immediately releases it and lets everybody else know within the Canadian Bar Association on our listserv. She is unbelievably generous and giving. And she's constantly doing everything that she can to help all of us stay up to date with the most recent changes. And so I'm going to start off, Tamara, by saying thank you, because you are awesome. You are so awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
And see, then I leave them speechless because they don't know what to say, because us lawyers are not out there saying how awesome we are. So it takes me, Mark Holthe, the Canadian immigration lawyer, to tell all of you that Tamara Mosher-Kuczer, who is the immigration lawyer in Ottawa, is way more awesome than I am. And that's exactly the truth. And so, and not to, kind of overstate, like pretend like I'm overstating things. It is the truth. In fact, you guys will remember the video that I did at 3 p.m. last, I guess it was Wednesday when they made the announcement. I can't remember, for the TR to PR pathways. But the first I heard about it was when Tamara shared an email saying that they're just going to announce this. And because of that, I was able to go online and let everybody know what was happening. And so thanks to Tamara, she has been an unbelievable help to not just me, but all of the immigration lawyers. So thank you so much, my friend. Okay.
I think you and I rank up there with two of the most enthusiastic immigration lawyers. So it's great watching you. I love your podcast.
Awesome. And speaking of podcast, way back when in the early days of Express Entry, Tamara joined me on one of the Canadian Immigration podcast episodes. Now, the interesting thing is, this is very similar to the format that we would have done there. But now that I've discovered this video on YouTube, this is way better to do kind of a vodcast than it is to just have the audio. So eventually we'll figure out how to strip it back, the audio, and then put it on the Canadian Immigration podcast. But I'm so grateful that all of you are tuning in. And Tamara, we're sitting at about 68 people right now. And so those of you who are tuning in, I want you guys to this is all about express entry today. So you can start posting your comments. You can start, you can start posting your questions, things like that. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into some of the problem areas that you guys may not even be aware of. Some of the places where people get to the questions and they say, what the heck does immigration want here? These things exist. And so before we dive into answering your questions, we're going to go through that. But before we get into that substantive portion, Tamara, tell us a little bit about yourself. So I've already said you practice in Ottawa, but tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into practicing immigration law. I know it wasn't for the money, because none of us do that. She's laughing. It's a genuine laugh, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I got into it, I think, well, I know because Betsy Kane at my firm, when she interviewed me, she was the first person to interview me in immigration. And she told me that this area is very complicated because it changes so frequently. And so probably I didn't want to practice in this area. And that really intrigued me. That sounded amazing. I love the idea of an area of law that was constantly changing. So I maybe in the last year I've regretted that a little bit, but
Yes, we all have. It's been
it's
horrible.
it's such an interesting area because it's constantly in flux.
Yes, absolutely. And so tell us, so you were interviewing, you had some options, and Betsy says, don't do this. Like, this is a stupid decision because you can never create a precedent data bank and actually leverage off of what you did before, because every single time you do a new application, you have to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. And just so everybody can see here, here's Betsy here, and this is Tamara's law firm website here. This is Betsy, and here's Philip here, and there's Tamara. But I can tell you that this individual right here, you guys can go back and you can watch the episode that I did with Immigration Nation. It was one of the first ones that I did here earlier. I think it was this year or maybe the end of last year. Betsy is the most colorful, tell it as it is, lawyer that you can know. And she just recently this year, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Betsy. She will receive the Award of Excellence for the Canadian Bar Association's National Immigration Section for all of the amazing work that she's done in the past year within our, well, who am I kidding? The past years and years within our section. So Tamara gets the pleasure of working with Betsy every day. I get the pleasure of calling her every once in a while and just getting reinvigorated with life because her perspective is always refreshing. All right. So there's a little bit of a background. So Betsy, basically, she says, this isn't an area that you probably want to practice on because it changes so frequently. And you said, so what pushed you over the edge? You said, you know what? I'm going to do this. And then what was your experience?
That pushed me over the edge. Betsy didn't hire me. But I went out and bought a bunch of immigration books and taught myself immigration law. And then 6 months later, she did hire me.
Awesome. That is so cool. And this is another lesson for everybody that's watching. Okay. Did you see this? Tamara's like a rock star. Okay. I'm not joking. She is a rock star. And Betsy at that time was not quite in a position to hire, but she did not give up. She didn't say, oh, darn it, why didn't she hire me? She actually went and said, I want to know this area. When I joined Betsy's firm, and she's going to hire me eventually, I want to know everything there is to know. And she put in the work, and she made the sacrifices so that she couldn't do anything but hire her. And I just got off an earlier, I guess it was kind of like a webinar that was for new immigrants through one of the settlement organizations, actually Access, who are one of the ones that have been chosen by the government. And those of you who are in the process of landing, you will get a notification to start to draw on settlement services in Canada. And Access was one of them. And they'd arranged, we're promoting Lethbridge within there. Come move to Lethbridge. And one of the questions was, do you need experience to be able to get a job? And it was exactly like you said, Tamara. The person who was working with the city, she actually really wanted to work in HR with the city of Lethbridge. She graduated from the University of Lethbridge, and then she was waiting tables. She couldn't get a job. And you can't just go there and give a resume. You have to go through the proper channels. But she worked, every person that asked her what she wanted to do, she said, I want to be an HR person at the city of Lethbridge. She'd go there, she'd inquire, nothing. And then finally, she was serving someone who happened to work in the HR department in the city of Lethbridge. She started as a casual employee, photocopying resumes for new applicants for HR. And she said she brought a plant. She brought pictures, hung it up in the office, even though it was a 2-week contract. And after repeated extensions, she got her full-time job 3 years later. So you have to be prepared to go after what you want. That was a little tangent there, Tamara. That was a little tangent.
I love it, but that's the other part I love about immigration is that it's full of these amazing stories. I learn about different jobs I've never even heard of. I didn't realize these areas were jobs. Every client forces me to learn things about new countries and their personal life stories. It's so interesting.
Yeah. And that's the fun part too, because whether it's an individual or a company, right? You learn things about the world that you in order to be able to actually, represent and present them in the best light to immigration. You learn all these cool things. And I think that's what fuels us. Okay. Well, lately Express Entry has been fueling a lot of people, and some people have been really fired up about what's happened. And some people have been thinking immigration is crazy. And that's what Rhonda Lee Carey and myself yesterday, we had our little go round about whether we thought the decisions immigration was making was crazy or not. Well, today is not about that high level, whether or not the decisions were right. Today is all about those top tips, those common headaches and problem areas that trip people up or that they struggle with because they just don't understand what immigration is asking. So Tamara, lead us off. Like if you were to pick maybe your first one that you would identify for all these viewers, what would it be?
Well, I think at a high level, one thing that I see, and frequently I have people come to me for consultations who have been refused, sometimes twice, before they bother to reach out to a lawyer. And what I frequently see as the primary, the background problem with what they've done is that they didn't understand at the outset that express entry, like any other immigration application, it's a legal application. The foundation of it is based on regulations, it's based on guidelines, it's based on policy. And if you don't understand what you're trying to prove, you're not going to be able to make your case. So I think people have to understand that when they're approaching their express entry application, they have to pretend that they are presenting their case to a judge. And so everything has to be prepared with that at the back of their mind. And they have to understand that there are two sets of information that they're trying to prove. They're trying to prove that they meet the points that they received under express entry, but they also have to prove that they meet the requirements of the program they were selected under. And people don't understand those two things. And I think if at the outset, if immigration could put a big bar at the top of the page of every application, this is a legal application, you must prove your case, maybe that would put people in the right mindset when preparing their applications.
Tamara, come on. Like this, all the forms are there. All the instructions are there. You do not need to hire a lawyer. It is so easy and transparent. Like that's the message that the government gives to everybody. And then of course, what they don't tell you is, oops, because of R10, we have done a completeness check and you're missing a color copy of your German police certificate. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to return your application, but don't worry. Just fix that little thing and get right back into the pool and we'll nominate you again. Oh, wait a minute. You had a birthday? Oh, that's too bad. You've lost 5 points. Well, we've got 200,000 other applicants, so that's all right. Yeah, maybe a lawyer might have helped you to get that through, but hey, my processing is going along just fine, right? And that's what we're dealing with. The messaging by the government is that this is so easy. And then you've got the people, my personal favorite, Tamara, online who have their own YouTube channels because they've immigrated themselves and they know exactly what to do. And they've written out this nice little instruction of how you do everything exactly like they did it. And voila, it's so easy. You don't need to hire a representative. You don't need to hire anyone. And then what they don't realize is that maybe 2 or 3 steps in their application were actually wrong. The officer missed it and just approved it when probably it should not have been approved. And then they're sharing all their tips and strategies with the world. That's what I see on a daily basis.
Or that the requirements have since changed.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because that's the other fun thing with immigration. The requirements are constantly changing.
Yeah.
So that's the making your case is extremely important. And so when I say you have to prove you meet the requirements, one of the big things I see here in Ottawa, because I'm right on the border with Quebec, is people who are residing in Quebec. And there's a requirement under all the express entry programs that you not intend to reside in Quebec. And if you're currently residing in Quebec, the onus is on you to prove your intention. You can't assume that IRCC will assume because you applied under the program that that's your intention. So you have to include proof of your intention. And so I see so many people coming to me who have included no proof of their intention. And personally, if you came to me and you were residing in Quebec, I would tell you most definitely do not submit your application while still residing in Quebec.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because we see this happening in the opposite direction with the provincial nominee programs. So people are looking for ways to come to Canada. They get nominated by a province. And then sometimes they don't realize that actually, no, you do need to go to that province. Now that's kind of crazy that they wouldn't realize that, but I get lots of questions. How soon can I move? And this is another one, maybe I'll direct back to you, Tamara. So what do you advise someone when they're working in, Ottawa and they're living in, I don't know what's close, Gatineau. I don't know what's kind of on the other side, right? Yeah. And they say, well, okay, well, I'll move to Ottawa once I get my permanent residence. So what do you advise them when they say, okay, well, what do I need to do? Because I don't speak French. I'm here. I went to McGill, but there's clearly no pathways for me right now. Like, what kind of things do you tell them?
Well, so for people who want to qualify under express entry, I say you absolutely have to leave Gatineau, which in our context here, Gatineau is much cheaper to live in. Yeah. Rent, everything is cheaper in Gatineau. So that's great. But if you want to become a permanent resident and you don't want to do it under the Quebec pathways, you have to move to Ontario. In terms of how long you have to stay, we have the charter that has mobility rights. So once you're a permanent resident, you can really do whatever you want. But your intention, and we're skirting the issue of misrepresentation here, which I always warn everybody about. And I know, Mark, you do the same thing.
Yep,
misrepresentation is by far the worst thing you can do in immigration law. So it's not the fact of you doing something wrong, it's the fact of lying about it or omitting it that is the problem. So yes, you can move back or you can move to any province once you are a permanent resident, but your legitimate intention at the time of the application, and you have to prove that intention in terms of express entry, is to not live in Quebec.
Yeah. It makes it clear, right? If you're currently not there when you submit your application, well, then it washes away. But if anyone who's, especially like I have one client, Tamara, that received his ITA, he's a Feb 13er, one of that 176 draw. And he's been trying for years and years, but he doesn't have French. And so he actually has an LMIA-based work permit for a restaurant in Montreal. And he received his ITA. And he's not like those on a postgrad work permit that, okay, if you get a job offer somewhere else, then hit the road and go take it. He has an LMIA. And we're in the process of trying to figure out a way to justify. And, I told him that he's probably got about a 5 to 10% chance we can make this work. So he's doing everything in his power, job offers, applying, showing where he's going to live, clearly articulating that if it wasn't for the LMIA and if it wasn't for, the fact that he doesn't speak French, the fact that he's in Quebec right now, he would have been long gone. He would have gone and he would have worked. He would have left. There are no options. There's no possibilities for him. But notwithstanding all of that, I still told him, I said, look, like when you're there and you're locked in, it is so hard to overcome that burden. And so be prepared. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's the most entrenched person that I've ever had in Quebec that we're trying to show him that he has an intention to live outside. Real significant issue. Yep.
Yeah. It's, and the case law, unfortunately, is against people in that situation.
Yeah, it is.
So another problem that I see people coming to me with is that they have the mistaken belief that immigration is going to go looking for information for them. That immigration is going to look at their past applications, that immigration maybe will look to their employer to get proof of what they're trying to prove in their application. And what I always remind people is that if immigration's going to look for the information, it's not going to help you.
No, it's not for a good reason. No, not to support you.
So you need to include all the required evidence, because we're going back to this is a legal application that you are proving. You need the evidence. And don't expect IRCC to go back to something you submitted last year or 10 years ago in your file for proof, because that's not happening.
I'm going to show you something. Sorry. I didn't mean to kind of cut you off here. So Diane is an immigration consultant that I know. And she says, I've heard stories of people who obtained PR through a PNP and when traveling from their home country to another province, got detained at the border and were filed under misrep, I think it is, and the PR was revoked. So I think you've probably heard about that as well. And you just finished explaining the reason, right? Do you want to comment on that, Tamara?
Well, so until you're landed, you're not a permanent resident and you don't have mobility rights. And so when you show up at the border and you're going to be landed and your intention is not the intention as stated in the application, well, now you have a misrep issue.
Absolutely. That is exactly correct. So those of you who have questions, the questions need to relate to what we're talking about. So many of you are already posting, and you should see this, Tamara. It's quite interesting. I know there's this massive groundswell of people looking for information on the TR to PR pathways, the new for essential worker. So hold off on those questions because those ones don't relate to our topic today as much. If you have questions about express entry, some of the more difficult aspects of it, post them. And if they're good enough, we will pull it in. All right. Okay. So,
and I think, Mark, the sidebar of that is that we're assuming that the documents required are going to be the same more or less for both programs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing been released specifically about anything. And so a lot of it is speculation. A lot of it is just going by what we learned from the technical briefing. And so if you have questions about express entry, okay, here's a good one for you. Here's a good one. We'll interject these because it's kind of fun. I love to see you because you know all of these answers. So when's the next FSW draw going to be?
So right now, the government is focusing on keeping people who are in Canada and not bringing in anybody who's outside of Canada. So the reason there have not been FSW draws is because, and not necessarily correctly, the assumption is that most people in the FSW pool are outside of Canada. And for some reason, immigration doesn't have the ability to triage FSWs in Canada versus outside Canada. So you're all lumped in together. So my assumption is that FSW isn't going to happen until the summer, when immigration is more or less 6 months out from assuming that the borders will be open. Mm-hmm. So because right now people who are landed as FSWs can't travel to Canada. They're all stuck outside of Canada. It's a horrible, horrible situation. So I don't think immigration wants more people in that boat. So I think if they do a draw in June, July, those people won't receive their landing documents until early 2022. And more likely, hopefully, the border will be open at that point and the people can travel to Canada.
And I think that's a pretty accurate. Yeah, I think that's accurate. Okay, so we're going through, and if you were just tuning in late, and we're at about 93 people now, Tamara. So if you're just tuning in, what Tamara and I are talking about, and really what Tamara's sharing, is her top tips, the things that she's found to be the areas most problematic and the ones that all of you really need to be aware of and understand to give yourself the best chance of really getting through this very legal process. So what do you have next for us, Tamara?
So this topic is near and dear to my heart because I've been campaigning with IRCC to try and clarify this issue for literally years. And so in earlier this year, IRCC attempted to clarify what they were looking for with translations. And IRCC actually reached out to me just before this was released to tell me it was going to happen.
It'd be so helpful, so helpful.
Because it's been a real thorn in everyone's side. So, but the translation requirement, if your documents don't meet the translation requirement, your application will be refused, particularly if those translations relate to documents required for the R10 completeness check. For example, the police clearance. And we often see applications that have been refused because the translations didn't meet the requirements, particularly the police clearance translations. So what do you need for a translation? And you might have to fight with your translator to give you the right documents. The translators don't know that these are the new requirements. So you need a copy, an unaltered copy of the original document that has been in the foreign language.
Here's a fun thing, my friend. We're going to pull it up.
Perfect.
And I'll go to the completeness check. I think, we'll just go off of here. I know there's more detailed stuff here, but maybe we can just go off of the completeness check website itself. So here's
Perfect.
kind of what we got here. Does that make sense? Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So go through what we got here.
So I'm going to start at the bottom, actually. You need
let's do it.
The original document. And if it's a police clearance, it has to be a color scan, not a certified true copy, a color scan of the original document. Then the translator, ideally a certified translator, does the translation. Then the translator takes that original document that you gave them, even if it was sent by email, whatever document they use to make the translation, they put their stamp on every single page. And those 3 sets of documents, the original, the translation, and the stamped copies of the original, all 3 of those have to be included with your application.
Yeah. Translation of all documents, both the source document and the translation must either be stamped by the translator, referred in the affidavit. And you can see here, stamp right here. And that's often what we see missing, is that stamp on all of those subsequent documents, right? And I'll be honest, when I read this, Tamara, and I see here, it must be either be stamped by the translator or referred to in the affidavit. Well, the confusing part is the affidavit can be provided by a person who is not a certified translator if it's not available, right? But this is where the confusion is. But you can see both the source document and the translation must either be stamped or referred to in the affidavit. And I think that's the part that gives me the most confusion, because, like it's just complicated. Like you and I sitting through this, it's hard to make tails of it, heads or tails. And we've seen repeatedly, even translators in Ontario not stamping all the associated documents. And that could get your application rejected, all for a lack of that stamp.
Yeah. So go back to your translator if they've given you a copy that isn't translated. Yep. And this is another warning I'm going to put out there, that there are a number of translation agencies.
I'm gonna ding the bell. I'm gonna ding the bell. So listen, guys, here. That bell means that this is important. So, or we could do this one, actually. This is better. Okay, pay attention. This is important. Okay, go ahead.
There are also requirements relating to who translates your document and how they sign off on the translation. And there are a number of very large translation companies. Their names often start with translation agency of, insert blank, because there's a lot of them. And the translation is not signed by the person who did the translation. It's signed by the office manager. And that is not the IRCC requirement. The requirement is that the person who did the translation sign off on the translation and stamp the translation. So you want to confirm with the translation company that you are employing that they're going to follow all these requirements. If not, do not hire that company, even if their price is cheaper.
Yeah. And I've seen the same thing, Tamara. So you guys, just to reiterate, it comes down to making sure that you're following the proper process for those translations, and don't just trust your translator to know what they're doing. Always refer back to the information on the IRCC website. Okay. Any other juicy tips that you have here before we open up a little bit more to some questions?
Oh my goodness. I have so many.
Okay, let's go. Let's go. This is awesome.
Okay. So one issue, and this one I don't have a great answer for, but I'm going to explain the issue because I see it a lot, is people who have undertaken unauthorized work in the period, particularly in the period between completing their program and submitting their post-graduation work permit application. So I see a lot of people who work in that 2, 3, 4 week period, or however long until they submit it. So that's unauthorized work. It must be disclosed in the application. You have to give a mea culpa, say, I'm sorry, I totally didn't know that I wasn't allowed to do that, and explain it. I have done this in a number of applications. Those applications have not been refused. But we disclosed it because to not disclose it would be a misrepresentation. And also it appears in the personal activity section.
Yeah. This is really important. So and people need to understand this because it's been so misconstrued and just misstated all over. So can you explain to people why you cannot just keep merrily working along after you finish your graduation before you get your postgrad work permit, or at what stage you can then start to claim it? Because remember, IRCC tells us from the date that you file your postgrad work permit, you can start to count your work history. Okay, well, if that's the case, then how is it possible to start counting work history at that stage if there's a break between my study and I don't have implied status? Like, how do you sort through all of that, Tamara? And I don't mean to put you on the spot because I've had a lot of people who've told me a lot of different things. You know, I remember I had a discussion with another lawyer where he said, look, it comes down to when the actual credential was issued. So if you finish your classes, that you can still work part-time up until the credential is issued. But once the credential is issued, then after that, you have to stop until the postgrad work permit application is submitted, and then you can start again. So I've heard some people say that and, and backed it up. But I'm sorry, like this whole area it's not clear. And like you said, part of the reason is immigration doesn't crucify people for it. So when they don't, then people just assume, well, if they didn't say anything, then it must be fine, right? And that's what sometimes some representatives who don't really know how to read the regulations, that's how they operate. Well, I did it 3 times before. Immigration hasn't said anything, so it must be okay.
That's it. So basically, if your school issues you a letter confirming you met the requirements to graduate, the day you receive that letter, you must stop working part-time, period. If you get a transcript that says you met the requirements to graduate, same thing. You must stop working. And at that point, you should be working a maximum of 20 hours a week. Okay, so from that point until the point that you submit your post-graduation work permit, you are not allowed to work. And so if you work in that zone, you've worked without authorization.
Yeah.
And then you have to declare it in your post-graduation work permit application, because if you don't, you've got a misrepresentation. Mm-hmm. And then you have to declare it in your express entry application, because again, if you don't, you've got a misrepresentation. And if you misrepped on your post-grad work permit application, you also have to explain that. Mm-hmm. So yes, I agree. It's an extremely confusing area. It's not clear on the website. It's clearer now than it used to be. Mm-hmm. And by and large, I have not seen IRCC come down on people who have worked without authorization in that period. Knock on wood, because I don't know, it could happen. But it has to be declared. If you don't declare it, you could be barred from Canada for 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the difference, I think. Tamara, we deal in possibilities, not probabilities. And that's usually what I tell my clients. It may be that the likelihood or probability of you having an issue if you don't disclose is very, very low. But there is the possibility that exists that an officer who actually understands and is having a bad day could make a finding. And so we could never, ever advise our clients that it's totally fine to just proceed and don't worry about it, right? But yet it's one of the most misunderstood areas of the whole application process. Mm-hmm.
And I'll put that as a side note, because for me, this is potentially an issue on the admissibility requirement of the new program. Because when do the people who worked without authorization become admissible again? And that's not clear. I've asked IRCC the question. I'm still waiting for the answer.
Yeah. And unauthorized work is theoretically operates from the date that the last unauthorized work occurred, right? And so whether that is the situation here, and Ronna Lee and I yesterday, we had quite a discussion about how fast we thought these 90,000 spots were going to fill up in the new TR to PR pathway. And, we just don't know. It could literally be a day if people have got everything sorted out and organized, and, you really, really do need to, you need to be prepared. You have to be, if you want any chance of getting through, just because we don't know what this means. And right now, there's no guide, there's no checklist, there's nothing. I'm just going to flip over here, and I have had a few people, and I'll point it out just really, really quick. If you are, I've got a bunch of different screens here. I'll put this one up here, and then I'll pull Nikita's question here. She says, will you post the link of the new Pathways Toolkit on your channel? I can guarantee that the moment immigration opens that up, that everybody will be clamoring to know. And I think from my perspective, and we're drifting a little bit from express entry, but understand it's going to be a crazy, crazy world if they don't release anything until May 6th. Because if on May 6th, then they officially open the program with all the requirements and there's no advance warning, then some of you who do not yet have your language tests yet, you might just to bide yourself a little bit of time. And I think everybody that also doesn't have their language tests are praying to whatever God they believe in, or just hoping that karma is going to cause the system to crash and be down for weeks on end, with everybody trying to get in as fast as they can, right, to buy time. But yeah, understand, guys, we're not talking a lot about the TR to PR right now for the simple reason that we don't know much about it. Now, with that being said, I want to do, this is where I'll plug something that we're doing in our firm. If you go to healthylaw.com, I have started taking registrations for the course that I'm going to be offering on this to help walk people through it. And so you can go here on the Healthy Law website and you can type in your name, email, and your phone number. You're all in Canada anyways, and we'll notify you, international students and essential workers who we're focusing on, because you're the ones with the cap. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But all you have to do is just go to our website, healthylaw.com, and right at the top is a place where you can connect in. And one other place that you can go is to the Canadian Immigration Institute website. And if you click right here on CR courses, then the first one that shows up is this one here. And guess when it's getting created? It is getting created this weekend. So we know we've got a pretty good idea what the forms look like. We've got a pretty good idea with the documents, but it's all going to be an evolving process. And, but we really don't have a lot of information on it. Okay, back to express entry, which is our topic right now. We've had a massive draw, Tamara, 176. Draw number 176 was massive, 27,332 people. And we've seen consistently it going down and going down as they do these draws, these large groups, 5,000, 5,000. Then the latest one, 6,000, which has taken it down to about 417. Before we transition to another topic, like, what do you think? Do you think that if they do another one here, I guess, are we already at Wednesday here? Is it Wednesday of next week? Potentially we could see another one. So what's your prediction? What do you think?
Since that crazy draw, I hate to make predictions.
Okay, let's say they were to do another 5,000 or 6,000 draw. Okay, maybe they decide to do another 6,000. We saw a little bit of a drop there when they did that. And with all of these programs and everything coming in, and everybody knows May 6th, people may or may not be rushing as fast as they can to submit their profiles in. They might be, getting themselves all psyched up and prepared to take a run at this. What are your thoughts for this score if it was a CEC draw?
Well, I think what I would do to come to an opinion would be to go look at what the composition of the pool was. And I don't know off the top of my head. I was looking at what was over 480 the other day, but I don't know what the composition is in the lower part. You're going to pull it up?
I can. Absolutely, I can. You bet I'm going to pull it up here. This is a little bit cheating, but we'll do this. We like cheating. Okay. So let's flip over here and I'll pull it up. I wish I could. I wonder, do you know what? Let me see. I wonder, is this one locked? No, it's not. Here, let me just see here. No, I can't switch it. I was going to switch you over there so that you could be the person talking here, but fortunately they have to look at my ugly face while you're talking. So here's the rounds of invitation. So the last one we had, 417. Okay, so that was on the 16th. So realistically, Wednesday potentially could be another one. And then if we look at the rounds, the previous rounds, here's what we have, Tamara. So, and we'll get back to the total composition here in a second. So you can see we took a drop from 432 to 417 in 2 weeks when they drew 6,000. And then before that, from March 18th, it was 449. And then they did it 2 weeks later. They dropped to 432. And then 2 weeks later, they did 6,000, dropped to 417. So that's kind of what we're dealing with in the last few draws. And then if we go here to the actual, as of April the 12th, which we don't know, there could be a bunch of people piling in, and we can go down here to the lower levels here and take a look at this. This is really where we're looking at, right? So what we don't know is, okay, based on the previous year, we know that everyone kind of like a lot of, all of these were pulled out. So anyone that was in here or basically higher, and then some of these at 417 and higher. So this is kind of what we're looking at in this stretch. So how many of these are FSW? How many are CEC? And then if we go down, it doesn't differentiate, I should say right here between the 56,000 that are here. But what do you think?
And the other complicating factor is now with the TR to PR pathway, a lot of those people are going to come out of the pool. And not a lot of new people will be able to come into the pool for CEC because the language tests are all booked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think we might see it go lower because I don't know how many people are out there with valid language tests who are not already in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I think
it will go much slower.
Yeah. One of the things that we also know is that people are looking and who are PNPs or who are already qualified through other programs, and they're trying to figure out, do I stay in this where potentially it's going to be another year, or do I start fresh and try to do this new program? And, because there's no restrictions. You can file as many bloody applications as you want to, as infuriating as it is. So what are your thoughts on that?
About filing multiple, I think it's a bird in the hand situation. You take the opportunity that is given to you now, because when Express Entry opens up to FSW again, the scores are going to shoot right through the roof. So anybody who is under 470, it's highly unlikely that they're going to get invited to apply.
Yeah, they won't have a prayer.
Like, this is your moment. This is your moment. Get in the pool. Apply now.
But, on the language testing front, Tamara, like you just shared this with all of us today. So look at this. It was actually, dated April the 22nd, but language testing for permanent to temporary permanent pathways. You can see here that they just said it's all good. Don't worry, right? It says they're aware that third-party language testing organizations had to reduce testing capacity to meet health guidelines. But hey, they understand they're now adding extra testing sessions to meet the increased demand. Doesn't that give you comfort?
Well, I know that I've looked for clients in the last few days, and you can't find a spot.
No. And the only piece of advice I can give people is, if you're in that situation, look every day, check every day, look for spots that are opening up. And that's the only thing I can think of. I had two consults today, Tamara, where both of them had exams booked for July and ended up getting test dates before the end of April here, that they opened up new spots. Yeah. And I also have clients that are going down to the US. Can you believe this? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I don't like that option. And you have to be very aware of the travel restrictions and the quarantine requirements.
Yeah.
But it is an option.
Yeah. Not one that we recommend or endorse. People are doing all kinds of crazy things.
And it's foolish that this is the situation immigration is putting people in, that they might have to leave the country.
Yeah. We're keeping our fingers crossed. One other, we kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but what are your views on the bridging open work permit associated with the TRPR? Is that crazy? Like they have to change.
It's not possible that a senior person has looked at this. It's just not possible that they haven't, because as soon as somebody who understands how all the programs works looks at it, there's no way they're not going to provide a pathway for these people who are currently working to continue working. Yeah. That goes against the
fabric,
the reasoning
of
behind this program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense. But I'm sure the person who was handling the social media channel, nope. They asked the person beside them. No, I haven't heard anything. Nope. So we'll see. I'll find out tomorrow, maybe when I meet with the minister's staff, and I'll bring that up with them, that this is ridiculous, and see if they can push it through. And I'll say, here's another opportunity for Minister Menachino to save the world and increase his, his popularity prior to the election.
And And if you opened up the language tests for academic, that would be
It would. It would. It would. Okay, what else do you got
but
for us?
notice I said if he has
If
not. That is
he's
not
not, no,
acceptable.
we're not making any announcements here. No, we're not. This is Immigration Nation, but we're not Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. No, we're not. And for that matter, we're not the Canadian Bar Association either. So these views are our own. Okay, what else do you got for us?
Okay, so I'm going to move a little bit into questions and what they're looking for within Express Entry.
Okay.
So one, and actually the Express Entry system is wrong in this one. So there are those helpful question marks throughout the system. I have alerted IRCC to this issue, I think last year or the year before, but it hasn't changed. It asks you which version of your CELPIP test. You've taken the CELPIP General 2014. You have not taken the CELPIP G. Because if you took the CELPIP G, you took it before 2014. But immigration in their instructions tells you to select CELPIP G. I always select General 2014 because that is the accurate answer. You can do whatever you want because apparently they don't know the answer to their own question.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a pet peeve. Personal activity section. This is an immigration loves in all their applications compound questions. And so that's not just one question. You have to read through the entire paragraph and the questions underneath. So the question is everything you have done in the past 10 years. If you're debating whether or not you should include it, include it. Because to not include it is an omission and a potential misrepresentation. That section is also asking for memberships in organizations at any time, not just in the last 10 years. It's also asking about your military or government work at any time, not just in the last 10 years. And I see people misreading that question a lot, and I think that's a potential source of misrepresentation, a huge source of misrepresentation. Also for the travel history, that's your complete travel history. Everywhere you have traveled in the last 10 years. And the place of origin is where you are living at the time of travel. So it's every trip you have taken away from the place you were living. So if you have a confusion about where you were living, look at your address history. And your address history reflects everywhere you were sleeping, not where you received your mail, where you were sleeping. Again, I think this is a huge source of confusion.
I'm cheering because I can't tell you how many times I've explained that, Tamara. And the way I look at it, I say, why are they asking? Like, what are they asking? What are they looking for? What is the goal of this question? Well, they simply want to know where you are physically present every single day in the past 10 years. And so whether you are coming, you're here in Canada and you're making a trip back to your country of citizenship, India, you record that trip back to India to visit your family and then back to Canada. That's a travel history. Do you include your trip from India to start your school in Canada? On this one, Tamara, I don't include that in travel history because that becomes my new address. And so when I'm doing that,
sometimes I put that in as ongoing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
And so there's a lot of, there's a lot of different ways of kind of, setting this up. But the key is, for me, if I have an address, I never put my travel history overlapping with my address at the same time. So something's a travel and an address, but I could see where individuals, I don't think it's wrong to do either one. But for me, the key is if you are, if you're going back to your country of citizenship, like you need to disclose that if your address is still remaining in Canada. And so we'll see how all of that plays out. All right. Now, while we're here right now, I'm just looking and it looks like Tamara may be frozen on us. Okay. So she'll come back in here and I'll just go back to this screen here. So we'll just wait a second for Tamara to connect and usually, she's already coming back in. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to pull Tamara back in here. Let's see if we can get her. There we go. Okay, you're back in. Can we hear you? I think we can. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's all good. See how easily we can bring you right back? It's just like we're on some kind of, CBC or CNN broadcast, and oh, we lost our correspondent in, in Islamabad, and now we're bringing them back in.
Okay, so we were at address history. I'm going to look at statutory questions. These questions are really, really important. It's not a survey. Yeah. This is if you lie in this section, definitely they're going to pull you up for misrepresentation. So again, compound questions. Read the entire question from the first word to the last word. And the big one, which we see people make mistakes on this on all the applications forms, is, have you ever been refused a visa or denied entry to Canada or any other country?
Any other country, yeah. Why? Why do they have to like tack that onto the end? So many people, they read, no, I've never been denied entry to Canada. And then they crucify them. Yeah.
So, and again, the refusal, having been refused entry to somewhere, having your electronic visa to India denied, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They do care if you lie about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so many people are told, oh, don't say anything because it'll look badly on you. It's kind of like listing periods of unemployment, because somehow it will reflect badly on me if they think I haven't been employed. Or what happens after we file our we graduate from school and we haven't started our first job. They'll think somehow we're a less candidate. Well, this is based on the rule of law. It's based on actual legislation. There's an act, there's regulations, there's policy. It's not just whether or not the officer likes you. And so.
That's it. So, that being said, saying that they don't care, if you're answering yes to any of the statutory questions, that's a red flag that you should be consulting with a lawyer.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
The document checklist, the words next to the documents in the document checklist, that's a bare minimum requirement. So Mark pulled up that great internal. So IRCC has their external public facing information and their internal information, which is available on the website, but harder to find. Go back to that document that Mark posted, and I'm sure you have the link everywhere. I tweet the link on a regular basis.
And you can just Google applications for permanent residence programs subject to the express entry completeness check. So that'll get you to where you need to be.
And the documents that are outlined in this list, that's a minimum. That's the minimum of documents you need to include. So if you're proving your employment, it's not just the letter confirming employment, because to be employed, you have to have been paid. So prove you were paid, include pay stubs, include your T4. If you were employed in the States, include your W-2, include a tax document, include third-party evidence, pay slips. The more, the better. Screenshots from the employer's website or from a university that you gave a talk at where the byline was the employer. All this external evidence helps prove that employment. That letter, that's the bare minimum. And you don't want to give the officer the bare minimum, because I go back to what I said at the very beginning, you are proving your case. So prove it. Give as much evidence as possible. Okay. Top pieces of advice.
Yeah. So actually, do you know what? We're gonna do this one again. I'm gonna turn on the air horn. Okay, so we're shifting. Okay, so now those are just some of the things Tamara's pointing out. Now these are the top pieces of advice. Okay, listen in.
And a lot of these are housekeeping, but they're housekeeping with a purpose. Take screenshots of every single page of your application, because that is your only proof of what you submitted. And if IRCC comes back with a question later, your only evidence and your only complete knowledge of what you told them are going to be those screenshots. Also, there are some situations with ghosts in the system that sometimes change your information. So again, the only proof of what you put are going to be your screenshots. Employ a naming protocol in the documents you're uploading. So you want to make everything as clear as possible to the officer. And you also want to make sure that you're not uploading the wrong document in the slot. Like, for example, uploading passport as your work experience, because that gets your application refused. So if you've properly named everything, that tells you you're uploading everything in the right slot. And your screenshot of the document checklist with the named document showing what is contained in that document, that's going to be your only proof of what you submitted after the fact. So you, in my opinion, that's extremely important. Mm-hmm. You want to review all parts of the application for conflicts, for internal conflicts between the information submitted, the work history, the personal activity, the address history, the travel history. You want to make sure that there's nothing. It says you lived in one place, but you were going to school somewhere else. If it's true, you need to explain how that happened or say it was distance education. And if not, you need to fix the mistake. You also want to do a check with all the supporting documents to make sure there's nothing that conflicts. And you want to go online and Google yourself and look at your LinkedIn and everything else that's publicly available.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times they have referenced what is posted on someone's LinkedIn page and then use it against someone, even though maybe it's a LinkedIn page you didn't even update yourself. And it's, but it can be really cruel. One tip I'll give as well, Tamara, is when I'm going through that process with my clients, we start off by screenshotting the address. And then we pull it up. And then as we work through it, I take a screenshot of the study history and the work history. So when we get to the personal history, we can make sure that everything is consistent internally. Because remember, address is by day, right? Work history is address history is by day, work history is by month, personal history is by month. And sometimes, you might have things that are a little bit off. And so that helps to be able to compare and make sure everything is internally consistent.
And then what Mark does and what I do with my clients is, in my case, I'm the first set of eyes and my clients are the second set of eyes. But if somebody is not going to retain a lawyer, you must get somebody else who is not you to review everything.
Yep. Everybody's cheering because they know that's right, Tamara. You cannot trust your own eyes. You can't. If you're spouses, then each of you take an independent look at it. If you've got a close friend or someone that you trust that can read and understand, you need at least someone to take that second look, because you just don't know what you've overlooked. We make the same mistakes over and over and our mind just plays tricks on us. So great tip.
And because Express Entry is a series of drop-down menus, it's so easy to make a stupid mistake. And I'll tell you one from the early days, and I may have even brought this up in our first podcast years ago, is I had somebody come to me who didn't understand why they were being asked all these documents for their Canadian spouse. Well, they said their spouse was from the Congo. So now, decent chance the application would have been refused because no supporting documents. But easy mistake, just really easy mistake.
Yep.
And so you don't want to get tripped up by an easy mistake. You don't need a lawyer for that one. Just the second set of eyes would have gotten there.
Absolutely. Here's an interesting question from Little Nelly G here. Why are immigration applications scrutinized as if criminals?
They're not scrutinized as if criminals. They're scrutinized as if they're legal applications being reviewed by a judge, which is why you have to treat it like it's a legal application, because in fact, it is a legal application.
Yeah.
And you want to prepare your application as if it's going to be refused and you have to take it to court. Every lawyer does this. You prepare the application as if it's going to be refused, and then you're going to have to go to court and prove why immigration was wrong to refuse it. So you better submit a good application.
Yeah. Great insight. Okay.
I personally, can I keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I personally always include a letter of explanation with every set of documents explaining what is in that set of documents and what I'm trying to prove, the two sets of legal requirements, how those documents prove that information. And you want to lay it out in a really clear way, because first of all, these officers are dealing with a mountain of applications. The information has to be legible. They have to be able to read it easily. You don't want your application to be the one that the officer says, you know what, I need a few more cups of coffee to deal with this one. and then tosses it to the side, the
Yes.
online side.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
so you don't want that. So you want, I like to clearly lay everything out, put a letter of explanation so that they know, here's my letter of explanation, which hopefully they read, and then they can quickly browse through the documents to see that those documents support what I'm trying to prove. And then I always include an overall letter of explanation where I explain how you meet all of the requirements of the program. Attached to that document, I always attach the language test results.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This way IRCC doesn't come back and ask for them at a later date. Fun technical glitch that I'm sure you've talked about before, Mark, that letter of explanation appears and disappears.
Yeah, I call it the smart and the stupid checklist. That's how I refer to it.
So don't submit your application without that. And that is also where you'd attach anything, any additional documents that there isn't a spot for, or that you might not have room for because of the size limitation. I always attach the ECA to the proof of education, even though it's not required. Just because it's not required doesn't mean don't do it. I already said clear scans properly rotated. That's, I think it's obvious, but it bears saying. So here's a side tip. I like to go to the family sponsorship application and look at what is required in the country-specific requirements to see if there's any additional document that my clients might want to get at the front end or try and get in case it's requested later. So that'll tell me often if that country has a military requirement, then maybe we get proof that you've completed your military service and been discharged. Like Turkey has like a civil extract. So I always include that with my application, because it's all about trying to give everything at the front end so IRCC doesn't come back to you, because anytime they come back to you, that slows down your application.
Everything. Can I pull this one in while we're going through this? So this is a really good question from Rena. And she says, what does members of organization, etc. mean? Which Tamara mentioned. Does it mean like being a member of clubs like Toastmasters, etc.? So what do you think here?
In my opinion, if it comes to your mind, and if you've ever included it on a CV, 100%, and honestly, like the way I word it normally is go back to being a Boy Scout. And that's the level of detail I want, because again, you're not going to get in trouble for including
too
it.
much. Yeah. Yeah.
But not including it will be a big problem.
So if you are an Al-Qaeda warrior and you need to make sure you put that on your application form that you were an Al-Qaeda warrior.
Definitely. But are they called warriors?
I don't know. Or if you've made any, if you frequently vacation in the desert hills of Afghanistan, maybe there's some things there that you might be needing to disclose that will probably bar you from Canada. But anyways.
But that's like, yes, those are the red flags that will appear probably in the statutory questions as well. And then you'll want to go see a lawyer.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yes. So in my opinion, if Toastmasters came to your mind, include it, because it doesn't hurt. It's 2 seconds of your life to add it to your application. Yeah.
There's no harm. Absolutely not. Okay. All right. We'll let you keep going here with some other good thoughts. And these are great tips. They really are.
Don't wait till the last minute to submit, because the portal goes down sometimes up to a week.
Yes,
the last
absolutely.
3 days we haven't been able to submit applications because you couldn't pay the fees, which meant you couldn't submit an application. So if you're at the end of your 90 days, well, guess what? Your 90 days just ran out.
They're done. Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen this even just recently, haven't we, Tamara? So the portal just recently was down and we were unable to make those payments. And there's a lot of people who've fallen out of status because they left it to the last minute. And it's across the board, whether you're a representative, whether you're an individual. So yeah, you never, ever want to leave things to the last minute.
No. And I always tell people, even the last 2 weeks, like, don't consider yourself to have 90 days. Like, really, in a COVID world, you have 75 days max. In a pre-COVID and probably a post-COVID world, you have 45 days max, and you submit that application.
Yeah.
A complete application. It still needs to be complete. And for those who are in the pool, who maybe don't have higher point levels, you want to diarize your language test results and your ECA validity to make sure that those stay valid, and that you book a language test well in advance to make sure that you're able to stay in the pool.
So just a quick list. So language tests, how long are they valid for?
2 years.
Okay, police
From the
certificate.
date of the test.
So police certificates, how about those ones? When do they expire?
From the country in which you currently reside, 6 months. From countries that the police clearance was issued after the last time you resided there, indefinitely. But if you travel back to that country, it's always a good idea to get a new police clearance, because it's possible that they find that whatever period of time you spent there was residing, and then your indefinite is no longer indefinite.
Yeah. ECAs, we're not usually too worried about them, but what's the length on those?
5 years.
And finally, medicals.
So in a pre-COVID world, 12 months from the day you took your medical, that would be the date, the validity period on your landing document. So that would be the time for you to land in Canada. In a COVID world, IRCC have been finding magical ways to extend some people's medical. So that being said, in express entry, if your medicals are expired or about to expire, take a new medical.
Absolutely. Okay, here's a question from George. He's a frequent viewer. He actually has taken my express entry course. He says, "Hey Mark, if we apply for both CEC and the public policy, TR to PR, will they surely force us to choose one application to go forward with?" So
and that's a hard no. You can have as many economic applications as you want. You have a limit of one family class application in process at a time, but as many economic ones as you want.
So what do you think? When are they going to force you? When are they going to say, okay, well, what are you doing? Like, make a choice. Can you say, I'm not making a choice until I've got PR in my hand? Exactly. That's how I approach it. Yeah.
And they're not giving you back your money for paying the second set of fees. So there's no point in telling them early.
No, none. All right. That's awesome. Okay. Any other? We're kind of crossing over an hour here. We've had a lot of really, really good questions. We've interspersed the questions with your good tips. Do you have a few more for us? Or are we just about at the end?
I think those are the ones that I had put together. Oh, this is a side one. It's not really a tip so much as if you're running up on the size limitation for express entry, there's an online system I like called I Love PDF. It's free. And it's the most legible way I found to compress documents.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love PDF. That's a great tip. And I'm sure that many of the listeners are familiar with it. That little product has been transmitted and relayed across the internet. Okay, let's pull up let's finish off with a few last minute questions. So I'll try sometimes when you're typing in the comments, there's typos and you're not quite as clear as you should be, but I think I understand what this is. So Diego says, I should include that I made my obligatory military service. So do you upfront, if you know that there was mandatory military service, do you upfront, the form? I don't know if you routinely fill out the form, the military service form that they often send back, and then upload that preemptively in the client information, or do you hold off?
So in express entry, I don't preemptively fill out the form. I include all the information about military, and I include any proof that the client has that they completed the military service, and I attach that to my explanation. And if they were exempt from mandatory military service, I also include information about that in my explanation.
Okay. Good question. That's a good insight. Okay, Shine has asked a question, and I think I can decipher it. Maybe you can too. when we input level of education, and I think this is when you're describing the actual level, should it be the same as that given in the ECA report? I'll jump in and I'll say no. Okay, I'll say no, and then I'll let you respond. So let's say your level was a master's degree and ECA gave you a bachelor's level. So that's an example where no, you're not going to say the same thing. But your thoughts, Tamara?
So I would agree with you, Mark, that that's how I would characterize it. But I would say ultimately it doesn't actually matter. Because all that matters is what the ECA says. And that's what they're looking at, is the evaluation that the ECA gave. So I would characterize it as the actual level of education you received. But ultimately it doesn't matter.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll show you just what we've got going on here in the background as we kind of get to the last question. So here's all the people that are tuning in. Sager says hello. Hina, we're doing fine, Sager. Nikita says hello. Divine, good evening to you too. Masood, we got our work permit approved. Okay, see, that's what happens sometimes. Clients come on too. I'm going to give you right here. Fantastic. I am so excited. We've got Carolina.
I think this is something that like clients and people should know too, that your lawyers, we share your excitement. We are, when I get a provincial nominee, when I get a client approved, my office, me, we're all just so excited. Sometimes I'm in tears when I'm talking to the client because I'm so excited. So you should know that we share your joy. We understand what a huge process this is.
Yeah, it's so awesome. We've got Ambu who's tuning in from Miami. We're doing great, Ambu. J Mel says, hope you're doing well, waiting for the new PR pathway course. Take care. Yes. And like I explained already to some other folks, this is the latest venture that Mark has entered into, and it's this one right here. So if you go here and you click on at our website, healthylaw.com, this is a masterclass, a DIY course that I'll be running that will actually start on Monday, you guys. So you can go in here, just click on the link, and then you can just put your name in, your email address, and you can be notified. And then on Monday, I will be starting the very, very first masterclass associated with this. And I better get Tamara back up here from 7 to 9 every single evening in a live private Facebook group. We'll be going and we'll be answering questions, and there's tutorials and there's checklists and there's everything to help you preemptively start getting ready. And then once we find out exactly what's going to happen, then we'll make sure that everything in there it gives you the direction that you need. And 7 to 9, you get to join me blithering away. So awesome, awesome. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Okay, so this one, Hina says, do we need our West report ready to apply, as an international student, or just need the reference number? So this is, I know she's asking the TR to PR question for that program. I think both Tamara and I both say, regardless, we always have the actual copy of it ready. And I'll give an example of what happens. So when it comes to the IELTS test results or your language test and the ECAs, immigration does not ask you to provide those. But I had a client who booked a consult with me that they requested, and like WES or IELTS or CELPIP, they're not perfect, right? So you're basically relying that they're going to be transmitting the information to IRCC. If they don't have it or can't find it, then they will request a copy of it. And if you don't provide it up front, this client received the instructions. They received the request for her to provide her IELTS report. She dutifully uploaded it. And guess what she forgot to do, Tamara? After she uploaded it into the checklist, guess what she forgot to do? You know.
She didn't click submit, confirm?
She didn't confirm to resubmit her application again to actually transmit it. And her application got refused. So there is a reason that we tell you to do these things. And there's a reason why Tamara went through the detail that she went through, describing the legal nature of these applications. And the one person who said, why do they treat us like criminals? Well, they don't. This isn't some frivolous application for, I don't know, what's a good example? I'm trying to think of something to be able to board a cruise down, the River Nile or something. Like this is a legal application that is built, and its foundation is on the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the regulations, and officers can't depart from it. And when you have policy overlaid that tells an officer what to do and how to treat something, they don't have a lot of flexibility. I remember years back, Tamara, that the officer I talked with, I can't remember who it was. Well, I think I remember who it was, but I won't say the officer's name. They told us that they really don't pay their officers to think, right? The officers are designed, everything's designed to be automated. That's why they force you from England or the US or Australia. That's why they make you write a language test, right? It's because the officers, they don't want them to have to determine, how well your English is. And so everything's designed to be as fast a process as possible. Okay.
And that being said, I've seen applicants coming from countries where English is not the first language score top marks. And I have seen American, Harvard educated doctors score in the 4 or 5 range.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, routinely I get my executives from Houston who do not score well on the written portion. So we've got,
because they don't study, and you have to study. Everybody.
You have to prepare, and you have to understand what the test is about. Like, and sometimes it's as much of an art as it is, your ability, understanding what to expect. Let's see here. Well, we're just about wrapping up here. Let's see, what does Sager say? CEC related question. Can we claim our work experience while we claim CERB during reduced hours of work? Well,
were you working?
Yeah.
Like, that's the question. It's not, so if you were on CERB because you were not working, then no, because you were not physically working. It's like when you're on maternity leave, you can't claim that work because though you are still kind of in an employment relationship, you're not physically working. So if you were physically working on a part-time basis, then that part-time work counts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And another thing that I see, Tamara, coming up right now with this new program is the requirement to be employed. And I think people have to understand very clearly that when they say that, they're going to look for pay slips. They're going to look for pay stubs. And yes, there's no obligation at this stage, everything I've read, to say that you have to be employed when your application is approved. But it does say that you have to be employed at the beginning. And
especially if you can't get a bridging open work permit.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. And then one other thing that I'll point out is an offer of employment from an employer is not employed. So if you have not started that job, you have not been working a day, then understand a job offer from someone without proof that you've actually been working there. And it's going to be interesting too, Tamara, because everybody's saying, oh, we're all going to be ready to rush in and submit applications. Well, if an employer is vouching that you're employed at the time in which the application is submitted, I've been struggling with understanding how you can submit any reference letter before May 6th to confirm that you're still employed on May 6th. And I'm overthinking it, yes, but it's a reality. So, if you have a letter from an employer dated November 1st, 2020, well, I don't know how effective that's going to be to confirm that you are currently employed, even though it was an open-ended letter. So those are some of the things that I've been looking at. Let's just see here. Okay, this is what I want to show you. This is what happens, and this is why I love to do this. Thank you so much for this practical tips, I think is what they're getting at. Highly appreciate. You're very, very welcome, Prithvi. Okay, this one, is it really first come, first serve draw like CEC and Express Entry? Just want to confirm, thank you. Okay, so let's clarify this. So first come, first serve is not what CEC is. It's not what Express Entry is. So when it comes to that program, they've actually eliminated first come, first serve, instead gone with a human capital model where whoever's is above the round of invitation level, then everybody submits. And from that standpoint, I guess when you submit your EAPR, technically at that stage, then they're putting you in the queue. But even then, there's so many other factors. With this, temporary resident, this TR to PR pathways, it's going to be a race to file because there's a cap. And once they hit that cap, done. All right. Any other thoughts you have while I'm searching? You feel free.
Well, I would throw in there, and I know, but the way they're characterizing it for the new program is there's going to be a clicker system. Like when you go into Costco, with every application that gets submitted is going to click towards the top of that cap. And that doesn't happen with Express Entry. With Express Entry, you're only helped if there's a tie and you're at the lowest number. Then you want to be you want to have submitted your profile prior to that tiebreaker date. But and Express Entry applications are not processed in the order in which they are received. I have applications from September that have been approved and from July that are just sitting.
Yep. So here's one. I think you've already answered this, but you can answer it again. Do you think some more candidates will be available under CEC even after the public policy on May the 6th? I think we can all bothly say the answer to that one, which is yes. There will be more draws.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
100, possibly on the same day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm trying to filter through here because we've had so many questions. I'll put a few more out in there. This is from Chile. This gives you an idea of where they're tuning in from. It's quite fun. And then Sonam, I'll say hello. And I know you've got a lot of comments out there, but I'll say hello to you too, even though you were kind of a jerk and I'm going to block you from my YouTube channel. Okay, all right. The dependents need IELTS too. And this is a question, I know it's TR to PR. And I know we're delving into this, but you can probably answer that one as well, Tamara.
So no, they don't need it for TR to PR and an express entry. They only need it if you need the extra points.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, we have gone through a ton. Let's just see here if there's anything else that we can kind of highlight. Well, we'll say the thank you. So Noran is over in the UAE. I love these. Thank you for vouching for us. So best thing is marketing team.
Can I throw one more?
Please,
throw one more with the police clearances?
Mm-hmm.
Just a side thought that
Yep.
it's really important that people don't just go to the country and ask for a police clearance. You want to go on IRCC's website and look at what police clearances they require, because some countries, they require 3 or 4 different clearances from different agencies. Some countries, they require court certificates. Some countries, they require driving records. So don't rely on just assuming that you know what police clearances are required.
Yeah, that is exactly correct. Okay, well, I think, Tamara, we're going to wrap it up here. This was really fun, and I know lots of people have been asking questions, and there's more than we can get to. We've hovered right around 100 people the whole time, so there's been a good group of people that have been watching live. Some have come, some have gone, and let's just see here. So best thing with marketing team, they're realistic. Now remember, Tamara, this is where I have the opportunity to flip over and point you guys down to the description below. You can see that Tamara's way smarter than I am. And so when it comes to this kind of stuff, you absolutely need to reach out and connect to her and her team and the lawyers in her firm. And let's just pull this up and we can show them. I'm going to flip the screen over here. So although it's my face right here, here's the team. So we've got Betsy and Philip. And for all intents and purposes, Tamara, I think you deserve a certified specialist as well. So the reality is, this is all that Tamara does day in and day out. Go to Capel Cain right here, and you can even find Tamara by contacting her right through here, and you can book a consult. It's all laid out there. Okay. And the link, like I said, is below, and all you have to do is click on it, and you can get access to this brilliant immigration lawyer right here. Thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us. There's another round of applause.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Remember, every Wednesday at 10 a.m., we have our True Live Q&A. And those of you who are wondering, why haven't you answered all my questions? It's because the Immigration Nation is really focused to specific areas. And I bring on lawyers just like Tamara that are awesome, that share their knowledge. And at the end of the day, the Q&As on Wednesday morning are kind of open season. But if you need any assistance and you're just struggling, that's why we're here. All right. Thanks so much, Tamara. Take care.
Thank you. You have a good night.
Yeah. See you, everyone. Bye.